Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Bhante.
Good morning. Okay, we all ready to go?
We are, yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so once again, good morning, everybody. So this will be our first meditation session together. So let's get into our sitting positions. So for this morning session, I'll give the same instructions that I gave yesterday for those who are just joining us or who weren't there for those instructions. And as we go throughout the day, I'll give less and less and just more encouragement. Yeah, so you want to get into a comfortable position. We can either sit on the floor, sit on a couch, a chair, a bed, whatever. Someplace that's nice and comfortable for you. Someplace that you won't be disturbed. You want to sit in position with the back fairly straight without it being overly rigid or uptight. We don't want to be slouching or leaning too forward. You want the chest cavity nice and open so you can have nice, easy breaths without overly struggling or being stagnant or anything like that. You can place your hands on your lap or on your knees. Eyes closed gently. To begin, we can take a few deep inhales and exhales. Breathing in through the nostrils. Filling up the lungs. Exhaling through the nostrils. Breathing in deeply. And exhaling. Breathing in deeply and exhaling. And just letting all thoughts letting all of our thoughts from our day, our morning, whatever, letting them all fall away, not holding on to them, not giving them any form of importance, just letting them fall away. And we're not producing any new thoughts for after meditation, after the discussion. There's no planning for the future. So no planning for the future, no thinking about the past. Just letting those thoughts all drift away. And when you feel ready, bring your awareness to the fact that you are just sitting. Bring your awareness to the touch sensation of the body, the buttocks against the cushion, the hands on the lap, the knees pressed against the floor, or the feet pressed against the floor. Feeling the touch sensation, coolness, the warmth. Pulses, beating. Rising, falling with the chest and the abdomen. If you like, you can quietly repeat yourself, sitting, sitting, sitting. Just reminding yourself that this is what's happening right now. This is what's going on in the present moment. This physical body is sitting. And if you like, you can scan the body from the top of the head down to the tips of the toes, going from section to section. Letting go of any tension you might be holding in the body, like in the shoulders and the back. Maybe cramping your toes or your fingers. Just grounding our mind in the body. Remember to keep in mind that this is not a race, it's not a competition. You can go at your own pace, go at your own speed. For some, it might be very easy, others might be struggling, but that's all okay. This is why we practice. When you get down the tips of the toes, you can go back up from the tips of the toes back to the top of the head. And once you get back to the top of the head, you take some more in-breaths and out-breaths. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in through the nostrils, breathing out through the nostrils. Breathing in, filling up the lungs, and exhaling. Then cease manipulating the breath. Cease controlling the breath. As always, with our mindfulness of breathing practice, our goal is not to change or manipulate the breath in any way, but to come in contact with the natural rhythm of the breath. Become aware of its natural flows, its habits. When the body needs to take in oxygen, it will breathe in on its own. When it needs to expel it, it will exhale it on its own. We don't need to add, we don't need to subtract, we don't need to manipulate it in any kind of way. Just let it all happen on its own. What we need to do is find a place on the body where we can watch and observe. For some, it's the tip of the nose. For others, it's the lower nostril, the top lip. For some, it's watching the rising and falling of the chest and the abdomen. So choose one of these places, the chest or the abdomen, the upper lip, the lower nostril, the tip of the nose, and place the mind there. Don't go jumping around to all these different places. Pick one of them and stick to it. This will be our safe space. It's where we come home to when the mind gets lost and scattered, gets confused. So it's important that you pick a place that stands out to you, that you feel comfortable with. And place the mind there. When we breathe in, it's just the in breath. When we breathe out, it's just the out breath. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to say anything. You don't need to manipulate anything. Just the breath. In breath, out breath. Occasionally, when the body needs more oxygen, it'll take a long, deep inhale, followed by a long exhale. That's perfectly natural. You don't need to do it. It'll happen on its own. All you do is watch and observe. Stay focused on it. As always, when we're sitting and watching the breath, there'll be all kinds of activities going on around us and inside us. Nothing we can really do about these things. It's just the way it is. It's nature. There'll be all kinds of sounds, birds singing, dogs barking, trucks and cars driving by, TVs playing, people talking. It is what it is. They're just sounds, just noises. Don't feed into them with anger and frustration and irritation. That's just ruining your meditation practice. Just acknowledge that these are sounds, sounds. And let them go the best you can. Go back to the breathing. Are you breathing in or are you breathing out? So long breath or short breath. And after sitting for a period of time, the body, of course, will start feeling pains and aches. That's just the nature of the body. There's no need to get disheartened, no need to get frustrated, no need to get angry. Not that you're really doing anything wrong. It's just the nature of the body. So what we can do is watch and observe. Acknowledge that there's pain in the body. Say it's in the knee. Place the mind on the knee. Place your mind on the pain. See how it changes over time. how pain is not just a solid mass that we can't get beyond. It is texture, it has rhythms, goes from a tingling sensation to a throbbing sensation to a cool sensation to a hot sensation. It's changing as we're observing it. That's why I get so frustrated with it, why I get so angry about it. Sometimes it just disappears all its own. So what we can do is watch and observe it, acknowledge it. You label it pain, pain, pain. The same goes for pleasant sensations in the body, like cool sensation or warm sensation. It's just a sensation, just a feeling, just like the pain. Doesn't last. Can't hold on to it, no matter how much we might want to. So why cling to it at all? You let it go, acknowledge it as pleasant sensation, pleasant sensation. So the pleasant and the unpleasant, we take what we can from it by observing it, watching it, learning its nature. Then we let them go. Go back to the breathing. No matter how much we want to stay on the breath, the mind will constantly try to pull us away. Thoughts of the past, plans for the future, anger, frustration, sadness, whining, complaining, daydreaming, fantasies, so all kinds of thoughts running around the mind, swimming around in the mind. It's just the nature of the mind. The mind wants all the attention, but we're not going to give into it. We're not going to try to solve all the mysteries of our past or in our future. This meditation, we're just going to acknowledge that these thoughts are happening, they're running around. We can acknowledge them, call them out, planning, 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 remembering, 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 daydreaming, daydreaming, daydreaming. Just call them out when you see them, and then let them go, let them fall away to the back of the mind. Don't cling, don't attach, don't read into them, don't get angry about them. They're just thoughts, they're nothing. We just let them go. Go back to the sitting, go back to the breathing. Bring yourself back to the present moment. So this is how we can practice for this time being. So continue on with your practice. Now, let's take some time to cultivate our thoughts of loving kindness. We'll begin with ourselves. You can see yourself in your mind's eye, sitting just as you are. Direct the thoughts of metta to yourself, wishing yourself all those good things. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. Just cultivating all these good thoughts, letting them fill your mind, letting them fill your heart. And when you're ready, when the feeling of metta has permeated your mind and your heart, send it outwards to all the beings in the world, all those who we don't know, whether they're good or bad, wherever they are, whoever they are. None of those things matter right now. All we do is send out thoughts of metta to the world, projecting it off of us as if we were a radiator sending out warmth. Send the thoughts of metta to all the directions, just as we wish ourselves these good things. Let us wish it for others. finish up our practice, you can slowly begin to open your eyes. To finish up our practice, we can rub our palms together, get them nice and toasty. Give yourself a nice little forehead massage, temple massage, top of the head, back of your head down to the back of your neck, shoulders and shoulder blades, upper back and lower back, down to your buttocks, your thighs and your knees. Shins on your calves, down to your feet. Okay, so that's going to do it for our meditation session together. So I'll see you all in the afternoon and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your period.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are ready to resume. Okay, and so today is July 4th, and this is American Independence Day. So we are finding this is the anniversary of the day that America gained its liberation. And so at least we're studying the way in which we can achieve our liberation, our independence. Okay, so let us begin with the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so let us continue. So we're going to continue with our study of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And again, I'm going to share the screen, get rid of some. Okay, so now we are working our way through the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. And yesterday we spent most of the day on the first Noble Truth in its multiple aspects. Now we come to the second Noble Truth, which is the Noble Truth of the origin of...
Bhante?
Yes?
The screen hasn't been properly shared. It just shows a strip, at least on my end.
Okay. Is the recording going?
It is.
Okay. So let me stop the share and try again. Maybe I should close some things that I don't need. Has it come through this time?
Oh, yes, Bhante.
Okay. Okay, so now we come to the second noble truth, which is the truth of the origin of dukkha. And by origin, we can understand the cause of dukkha. And first I'll read the text in English, and then we go through the Pali words. So it is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence. Okay, so we have in the Pali, the compound, it's dukkha samudayam, translated origin of suffering or origin of dukkha. So the word samudaya, as I said, has the meaning of cause or the fundamental condition. Sometimes it's close with the word hetu, which means cause. And the cause is said to be tanha, a word that I translate as craving. And sometimes I've seen some people who create misunderstandings of Buddhism by saying that according to Buddhism, the cause of dukkha or suffering is desire. And then they think that since Buddhism aims to gain liberation from suffering, therefore, to gain liberation, you have to end all desire, including the desire for liberation, which then seems that the Buddha's teaching is putting us into a kind of vicious or leading us to a dead end, where if we have to get rid of desire, we also have to get rid of the desire for liberation. And if you get rid of the desire for liberation, then you don't make any effort to gain liberation. And then you wind up unable to go anywhere. But it's somewhat of a misunderstand or mistranslation to render tanha as desire. But rather, the Pali word tanha is related to in Sanskrit, the word used is trishna. Which is related to the English word thirst. And so what's meant by tanha is this, call this blind thirst, or we could say self-centered desire, selfish desire. But there is another word that we often translate as desire, and that is the word chanda. And chanda in the Pali text is used with different nuances. Sometimes chanda is used almost as a synonym for tanha. So we have desire. In that case, it's just a synonym for craving. But there's also a kind of desire that is called kusala chanda. That is wholesome desire, desire for the good. And so this is the desire that the Buddha encourages. And in fact, when you see the formula for right effort in the Noble Eightfold Path, the Buddha explains the right effort. He says that the practitioner generates desire for the removal of unwholesome states of mind and generates desire for the arising of wholesome states of mind. And then the Buddha says often, he says one should bring forth a strong desire for realization of the goal, to attain that which one has not attained before, to realize that which one has not realized before. So we shouldn't confuse craving with, but take craving to mean desire in a broad and general way. But craving is rather desire that is grounded in ignorance and is aiming at gaining things in a selfish way or self-centered way. Then in elaborating on or describing the nature of this tanha, the text uses a number of qualifiers. And the first of these is quite significant, is pono bhavika. Pono bhavika is an adjective which is based on the word puna bhava, and puna bhava comes from puna, which means again or repeated, and bhava is existence. So puna bhava is repeated existence or renewed existence. And then from this noun, we get the adjective. The adjective based on this noun is pono bhavika. So this is quite significant because I've heard some people say, these are usually the Buddha, the people who sort of reject traditional Buddhism and say, I want my Buddhism, but I don't want it to have anything to do with rebirth. I just base my understanding of Buddhism on the Four Noble Truths. They're perfectly clear, perfectly accessible, perfectly visible, right here and now. A very incisive psychological understanding of suffering. So none of that rebirth nonsense. But in fact, if we look at the definition of the second noble truth, right here, the Buddha explains tanha, craving, as pono bhavika, that which leads to renewed existence, or that which causes repeated existence. In other words, craving, as I'm going to show, is the sort of motive power, the engine behind the process of rebirth. Okay, the next expression is Nandi Raga Sahagata, which is translated accompanied by delight and lust. Delight is Nandi, and Raga is lust or even attachment. So we say accompanied by delight and lust, or delight and attachment. But as the commentary explains, this delight and lust are not just something distinct from craving, but these are just two modes in which craving works, sort of two manifestations of craving. So the more primary would be raga, which is the desire to obtain that which one doesn't presently obtain, the craving to gain possession of what one doesn't possess. And then Nandi, delight, is taking delight in that which one presently has. So I don't have let's say, a new car. I see the car in, well, let me take my personal example from when I was a college student. And when I would go to living in New York City, and I would go, at that time I was a great fan of contemporary jazz, and I used to go into Manhattan And there was a record store on, I think it was 49th Street, Sam Goodies. And they would have the new records in the window. And when I would pass by, I would see a new record. And then the desire would come to buy that record. And so I would go home and I would be daydreaming about the record, fantasizing about the record, yearning and craving for the record. Then when I would get my weekly, so that would be raga, the desire to acquire that what I don't possess. Then when I save up a little money, then I go into Manhattan again, go back to Samuel Goody's, buy the record, take it back home. In those days, we had the 33 RPM records, and then put it on and listen to it and enjoy it. That would be Nandi, delighting in it. And of course, what happens, the way craving works, well, maybe that is leading into the next description. So I'll come to the next term. And that is Tatra Tatrabi Nandini, which is seeking delight here and there. So this is the way craving works. It seeks delight in one place. Once it finds delight in some object, some experience, some possession, then after time, it becomes disinterested. It loses its interest, loses its delight in that particular object or experience. It becomes even bored with that object of delight. It becomes disillusioned with it, and then it starts seeking delight someplace else. So in the case of the jazz record, after I take it home, I'm on the subway train, can't wait to listen to it. I listen to it, I really enjoy it. The next day I listen to it again, over the next few weeks, repeatedly listen to it. Then after a few weeks, I've become so familiar with it that I can replay all of the solos in my memory. And then I take another trip into Manhattan and I see some new records on display in Samuel Goody's. And then I lose complete interest with the record that I have. Just I put it back in the cupboard and I don't even take it out anymore because I'm dreaming of the next record. And then again, the way seeking delight here and there. When I was living in Sri Lanka, of course, every day we get Sri Lankan food for our meal. And I used to remember the days when I was living in New York, in college with my friends. We used to go into Chinatown in New York, and we used to choose different Chinese restaurants and order Chinese food. And so here I am in Sri Lanka, thinking of, oh, if only there was some Chinese restaurants in Kandy. I was living in the upcountry town of Kandy, but no Chinese restaurants at that time in Kandy. And I even would remember having a dream at night that I was in Chinatown with my parents, and we were looking around at 5 different Chinese restaurants, deciding which one should we go to. And then I wake up and disappointed, no Chinese restaurants here in Kandy. And then the next day for the lunch, there comes the Sri Lankan food. Boring. So used to it. Okay, now I'm living in a Chinese monastery, so every day Chinese food. But every once in a while, this was before the COVID pandemic came, some Sri Lankan people would come to offer lunch, and they would bring some dishes of the Sri Lankan food. And it was such a delight to have the Sri Lankan dishes laid out in the kitchen. This was actually Siu, his mother, and sometimes Siu himself would bring this kiribat, that's the milk rice, coconut milk rice, and the different spices that go with it. And so then there was finding delight It would come to delight in the Sri Lankan food. Then the next day, back to the Chinese food. Okay, so this is seeking delight here and there. So that's the way craving works through each of the senses. We're always seeking delightful visual objects, delightful sounds, different music, different odors. Maybe that's not so prominent in human beings, but craving for different tastes. Yeah, even here, back in the pre-COVID days, we have the Chinese food every day. So sometimes one or another of my lay supporters would say, would you like to go to an Indian restaurant for lunch? Yes, let's go. Can't wait. Craving for tastes, craving for tactile sensations. Then there's also the craving for mental objects. You know, we like to, well, construct fantasies, ideas, intellectual entertainment. Then those with more philosophical disposition construct the light of physical, metaphysical, speculative, philosophical systems, which they delight in. And so delight operates even through the mental faculty. Okay, so these are the descriptions that are used in the sutta. And then the text enumerates 3 types of craving. Craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for non-existence. I want to go to my, yes, we have the Pali here, kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. I want to go to my other file now. Okay, to get, for explanations of these 3 types of craving, what's interesting is that the Sutta Pitaka doesn't give formal definitions of these 3 types of craving. A little bit puzzling why we don't find formal definitions. Perhaps the Buddha gave formal definitions and they just didn't find their way into the Sutta Pitaka, or perhaps against the intellectual background of the period, the meaning was understood. But to find formal definitions, we go to one of the books of the Abhidhamma Pitaka called the Vibhanga, which it has a chapter on the different defilements, and then it gives the definitions of the different defilements. I seem to have, oh, I see, okay. So this is the definitions given in the Vibhanga. So it says, what is bhavatanha? So it says it's the lust and attachment connected with the view of existence. That is the eternalist view. And then vibhavatana is the lust and attachment connected with the annihilationist view. And then it says the remaining craving, all other types of craving apart from this, is kama tanha, or sensual craving. I'm not so sure that I would agree with this because, okay, it says bhavatana is the lust and attachment connected with the view of existence, so the eternalist view. Okay, so far as I can see, dogs and cats, deer and cows, even insects will have some attachment or craving, attachment bound up with their lives, by which they will defend their lives, protect their lives, and will flee any threat to their lives, a craving to preserve their lives. And that craving will go on to generate, when they die, that craving will go on to generate a new existence, a rebirth. But I mean, I've never had a conversation with a deer or a dog about what their understanding of existence is, but I'm a bit doubtful that any of them will hold an eternalist view, the view that they have an eternal, permanent, indestructible self. And yet, I think it's very likely that the dogs and the deer and the cows have bhava tanha, the craving for existence. But I think it's quite possible that bhava tanha, the lust and attachment connected with the annihilationist view, the view that at death, everything comes to an end and that there's no survival of any form, no personal continuity beyond death. But suppose we have, a hedonist who holds the view that death means the end of everything, that there's no survival of death. And therefore, he comes to the conclusion, while we're alive, we should enjoy our life to the utmost. And so the hedonist plunges into all the variety of sensual enjoyment. So I don't think that is vibhava tanha, but that would be kama tanha. So let's move on. The Vibhanga gives another explanation of the three types of craving. It shows that even the formulators, the authors of the Vibhanga, didn't hold a fixed interpretation of the three types of craving. So it says, what is kama tanha? It's the lust and attachment connected with the sensual realm of existence, or maybe lust and attachment for existence in the sensual realm. Then bhava tanha is lust and attachment connected with the form realm and the formless realm, the realms corresponding to the jhanas and the formless meditations. And vibhava tanha, again, is lust and attachment connected with the annihilationist view. Okay, I have my own interpretation, which I think is simpler than the previous ones, and I think maybe more convincing in my opinion. So what is kama tanha, sensual craving? It's simply craving for the enjoyment of sensual objects. And what is craving for existence? It's the craving to go on existing, the craving that motivates us to preserve our life here and now, that attachment to our life, maybe also manifesting as fear of death, and then that craving which drives us, or which drives the stream of consciousness on to a new existence when death takes place. And this seems to be supported by these suttas, which speak of craving for existence as the fundamental underlying root of punabhava, of the cycle of repeated birth and death. And then what is the craving for non-existence? What is the craving for annihilation, the craving for a complete end to existence, with the underlying view that existence comes to a complete end at death. And I find some support for this in a sutta in the Iti Vuttaka, a little sutta in the Iti Vuttaka. Do you see the document? Did it appear? A PDF?
Yes, Bhante.
Oh, okay. So here the sutta is speaking about beings who are held attached to two kinds of views. And because of this, some hold back or stick fast, and some overreach or go too far. Okay, so how do some hold back or stick fast or remain or stagnate? And so here it says, devas and human beings enjoy existence, delight in existence, are satisfied with existence. And when the Dharma is taught to them for bhava nirodha, for the cessation of existence, in other words, for nibbana, their minds do not launch out upon it and pursue it and become resolved upon it, but they remain attached to existence. And so they can't launch out for and strive for bhava nirodha, the cessation of continued existence. So this, I would say, is that delight in existence, that enjoyment of existence, that attachment to existence, that is bhava tanha. And then they formulate the view that there is some permanent, everlasting self, and in that way they can assure themselves of a permanent, everlasting existence in the future. And that is a way of holding back or sticking fast, because they don't move out towards the cessation of existence. But there are those who go too far, overreach. These would be certain like philosophers and ascetics in the Buddha's time who are troubled by existence, and they sort of repelled by existence, and they aspire for non-existence or non-being. And so because of that, they adopt the view that when the body perishes at death, when the body perishes at death, the self is annihilated and destroyed and does not exist after death. And that is peaceful. That is the excellent. That is the truth. That is reality. So this seems to be designating a particular group of what we might call pessimistic philosophers. Maybe in our own time, it would be thinkers like the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche and some of the existentialist philosophers who see all of the drawbacks and dangers in existence. Actually, Nietzsche doesn't quite fall into that category, but maybe some of the existentialists who see the faults and flaws in life and then adopt the view that death marks the end of everything, and then they become attached to that view and delight in that view. I would say that that is the manifestation of the craving for non-existence. And then the Buddhist disciple is one who sees that which comes to be as having come to be, who sees the arising and ceasing of things and dependence on conditions, and then practices for turning away from what has come to be, for dispassion and for the cessation of what has come to be. Okay, now we'll go back. Okay, now I want to explore how craving is the origin of dukkha. In what sense is craving said to be the cause of dukkha? And the way I look at this, I could look at this from two angles, two perspectives. I call one a psychological level, and the other, I don't have a good term for it. We might call it the existential level or the meta-psychological level. Meta in the sense of what lies beyond the psychological, or even maybe call it the metaphysical level. So the psychological level, this is something, the way the relationship between craving and suffering is directly visible. something we could see for ourselves right here and now. So we have when somebody is excited by raga, by lust, lust being another word for craving, overcome by lust, by craving, with the mind obsessed by it, then they act for their own affliction, they act for the affliction of others, they act for the affliction of both, and they experience mental suffering and dejection. So going back to, Bhikkhu Bodhi, back in his days as a college student, this, of course, is not the very overpowering type of dukkha, but he sees the records in the window and he goes home and he's thinking about it. And as he thinks he doesn't have enough money to buy the record, and so he's experiencing mental suffering and dejection. Of course, there are more intense forms of suffering that arise because of craving. So we could take the young man who falls in love, a young woman in love, and they not able to win the affection of the loved person. And so here we have craving leading to mental suffering and dejection, even to the point where when some lose or not able to win their loved one, then they commit suicide. Love can be so destructive, that emotional love can have such serious consequences. So whatever object one strives to obtain, whether it's the affection of other people, whether it's wealth, whether it's position, fame, status, one craves for it, fails to obtain it, and then acting to obtain it, one might act in ways that are harmful and destructive to oneself and to others, and then one experiences mental suffering and dejection. In fact, we could even see different stages in the way craving induces suffering. Yeah, I didn't put this in my notes. Let me see if I could recollect those stages. So first, I have the suffering that arises through lack. So when one thinks of a particular object or a particular situation one would like to obtain, and one doesn't have it. And so when one thinks about it, oh, I'm yearning for that, pining for it. I wish to obtain it, or I wish to obtain her love. I want to obtain her affection. I want her to be my partner. And one doesn't get it, then there's that lack, that absence, that pain of deprivation. Okay, then one makes the effort to obtain the object of desire. So that we could call the dukkha of striving. I want to be wealthy, and so I have to go to school and maybe take courses in business administration, and after graduating, get a job in a company. I'm not satisfied with this job. I move on to another job with more lucrative prospects, and I work myself up till I become vice president, president, chairman. And so there's this striving to obtain the object of desire. I fall in love with a girl. I have to chat with her, go out with her, try to win the affection in various ways. So that's the way craving causes the dukkha of striving. Then when I obtain the object of desire, there's the craving of attachment with an underlying ripple of worry and anxiety that I might lose the object of attachment. Okay, so I'm now the CEO of the company, but I'm now in my let's say late 50s, early 60s, and there's this bright young rather aggressive guy that's come into the company, who's I see him working his way up over a couple of years. Now he's get appointed vice president, and I can see in his eyes he's not satisfied being vice president. He wants to become president. I see him chatting with this guy, with that guy, and I realize he's plotting to knock me down from my position as president. So I'm worried and anxious that I'm going to be deposed from my position as CEO. Or I win the affection of the young girl that I've fallen madly in love with. And so I'm so happy and joyful that I have her love. But then I see her off in the distance chatting with another guy, and they're laughing together. Wow, what's going on? And now I see them smiling at each other when I'm walking with her. We walk past that guy. She smiles at him and he smiles back at her. Is something going on between them? And this could really become quite destructive in human relationships. I become jealous and suspicious. And then maybe she comes home late from work. Why did you come home late? Oh, I had to work late. There was a lot of work at the office. Really? And then maybe I get a private detective to follow her. And so there's a lot of anxiety building up over this attachment. And then there's the dukkha bound up with success, with obtaining the object of desire. And then comes the dukkha of loss. So this young, ambitious, upstart executive, I get a word, the chairman of the board calls me in, says, I want to have a chat with you. And he says, well, he won't call me Bhante. He'll say, sir, we've been appreciative of all of your devotion towards the company over so many years, but we feel we need a little change of personnel. And, Jimmy, who's been the vice president, we've been very impressed by his ideas. He's bringing really breath of fresh life to the company. So, I mean, we really liked you so much, but we want to give you a very generous retirement package. And I'm complaining, I don't want any retirement package. I want to continue to be the president. Sorry, my friend, but we have to, we need some changes. And so in 2 weeks, you can collect your things, and we wish you all the best for the future. Wow, what a letdown. Brokenhearted, I have to leave the company. Okay, so that's one kind of loss. And then my girlfriend calls me over and says, we've had a very warm and loving relationship over the last couple of years. But, there's been a certain breakdown in communications in recent months. And there's a fellow at the office that I've been speaking to, and we find that we get along very, very well. And so I'm going to be packing up and moving out and moving over to him. And so all of my suspicious and my jealous suspicions are now confirmed. And it comes the separation and broken heart. So this is the dukkha that arises from loss. But even the dukkha can come not only from the loss, but also dukkha arises from boredom or oversatiation. So it could be that I've been working at that job, I'm the president of the company, but I'm no longer satisfied because this is a small company and there's a bigger company which I'm looking across, maybe across the city, a bigger company, and I want to get into that company. Or if I'm a college professor, I want to get appointed to a more prestigious college. And so my present position now seems dissatisfying to me. And so that's a kind of dukkha that arises from craving for higher position, and the craving because of boredom and dissatisfaction with my present possession. And also with human relationships, love will bloom and flourish sometimes for a few years, but then the partners become bored with each other and start looking elsewhere. Or we could think back to my French-Italian friend years ago at the monastery, where he would get the kuti that he wanted and then starts getting dissatisfied with that kuti and looking at somebody else's kuti and thinks, I want to get that kuti. And so these are different types of dukkha that arise from craving at the psychological level. I'm going to come to the meta-psychological level, but now we will take a little break, a little tea break, and then we come back at 10:30, and then we'll continue the discussion then. Okay, I think we're ready to resume. So this is the second afternoon session on July 4th. Is the screen visible now?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay.
Yes, it is, Bante.
Okay. So now we come to the what I call the meta-psychological level for understanding how craving is the origin of dukkha. And here the word dukkha is more appropriate than the English translation suffering. So at this particular level, we lay out how craving is the fundamental driving, the force, the fundamental force that drives the cycle of repeated existence. So this is underscoring the aspect of craving as being pono bhavika, as that which leads to renewed existence. Because what is existence from the Buddhist standpoint? Existence is the constellation or the assemblage of the five aggregates. And what is it that brings the aggregates back into being again and again is craving, what is called purima craving, the craving from the previous life. At death, when it's not, when that craving is still present, still active at death, then it will bring into being a new assemblage of the five aggregates, which constitutes the new existence. And we find that aspect illustrated here when the text says, okay, when one dwells contemplating enjoyment or pleasure or satisfaction in things that can be clung to, in the objects of clinging, that would be in the objects of the senses or in the five aggregates themselves, craving increases. And so one is looking for pleasure or enjoyment, as in that definition of craving, it is seeking delight here and there, seeking enjoyment here and there. And so one is looking for enjoyment in the objects that can be clung to. Then craving increases. Okay, with craving as condition, clinging comes to be. So clinging is maybe a stronger form of craving. So craving is the fundamental drive for possession, for enjoyment, for position, and so forth. And then when you obtain the object of desire, and then you hold to it tightly, that is clinging. And then clinging also brings in the aspect of view, of seeing things as being I and mine. Okay, then with clinging as condition comes existence. And the way this is explained, that clinging becomes the condition for the arising of a new existence in one or another state of existence. And then with existence as condition, there comes birth. With birth as condition, old age and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. So that is the origin of this whole mass of dukkha, the dukkha of birth, old age, and death, sorrow, and so on, originates because in our previous lives, we were looking for enjoyment. And when we found things to be enjoyment, things to be enjoyable, we crave them. That craving brought a clinging to the whatever we could acquire. And that clinging paved the way, paved the road to a new existence, or laid the groundwork for a new existence. And that new existence, this present existence, began with birth, and it will eventually lead into old age and death. And in the interval, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and even despair. And then the text illustrates this with a simile. So the Buddha says, suppose there was a great bonfire consuming a great load of wood, and then a man would keep on throwing more heaps of wood onto the bonfire from time to time. And so, sustained by that wood as the fuel, that great bonfire would burn for a long time. So, throwing the dry wood onto the bonfire is like seeing enjoyment in things that can be clung to. So that is the origin of this whole mass of dukkha. And now we come to the cessation of dukkha. And so let us go. So this is now the third noble truth. And this is called the truth of the noble truth of the cessation of dukkha. And then the Pali expression is dukkha nirodha. So first let's read the English translation. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. And then we could look at the Pali just to get the exact meaning of the words. So the noble truth itself is called dukkha nirodha. And then it's defined as the remainderless, that is asesa. So sesa is a residue, what is left over, what remains. And this is asesa. There's not even a trace, not even a residue of craving to be left, or not even a residue to be left of viraga, the remainderless fading away in cessation. Yeah, so the word viraga actually has two meanings, and both seem to apply in this context. Viraga, on the one hand, it can mean dispassion, the absence of raga, raga being lust or attachment, and viraga, the absence of that lust. That's dispassion or non-attachment. But the second meaning of viraga is fading away. And that seems to be the meaning that's relevant here. So it's the remainderless fading away up because it's put in juxtaposition to craving. So it's the remainderless fading away of that same craving that drives the cycle of rebirths, the craving that causes dukkha, the fading away and cessation of that craving. So this would be the first aspect of the truth of cessation, the remainderless fading away and cessation of that craving. Then the next term used is chago, and this is the Pali rendering of the Sanskrit tyaga, which has the sense of renunciation or giving up. So it's the giving up of that craving. And then patinisago is relinquishment, also like renunciation. So chago, patinisago seem to go together, giving up and relinquishing. Then muti is freedom. So this is in Sanskrit, it's mukti, which is similar to the word moksha, also from the same root. So it's freedom or liberation, but in this case, liberation from that craving. And then unalayo, which is the absence of alayo. So alayo is something that one leans upon for support, that one relies upon. And unalayo means not leaning upon anything for support, not relying particularly upon that craving for support. So you can see that this third noble truth is just sort of the reverse logic in relation to the second noble truth. So if craving is the origin of dukkha, if you want to get free from dukkha, you have to eliminate the underlying cause. That cause is craving. So the cessation of suffering comes about by removing, by eliminating the craving that causes dukkha. And how that cessation of craving of dukkha comes about. Again, there are two, the way I interpret it, there are two aspects to this corresponding to the two aspects in which craving is the origin of dukkha. We have the psychological and the metapsychological. So at the psychological level, so when one experiences the remainderless destruction of lust, hatred, and delusion. So the Buddha says, in this way, the Nibbana is directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable to be personally experienced by the wise. Or maybe if we go back to the previous definition. Okay, so yeah, we have it actually stated here. When lust is abandoned, then one does not intend for one's own affliction, for the affliction of others, for the affliction of both, and one does not experience mental suffering and dejection. So this is the directly visible cessation of dukkha, at least with regard to psychological dukkha. So, and then another statement illustrating this, again from Anguttara Nikaya. So this is the reflection of an arahant, one who has reached in this life the end of dukkha itself. So one understands, this is the arhat speaking, formerly there was greed, that was unwholesome. Now that is gone, this is wholesome. Formerly there was hatred, formerly there was delusion, that was unwholesome. Now hatred and delusion are gone, this is wholesome. So it's in this way that in this very life, one dwells without craving, inwardly cool, experiencing experiencing bliss, sukha patisangvedi, having become holy, Brahma Bhutena Atana. So this is the psychological aspect. And then we have the metapsychological aspect. So this is the cessation side of dependent origination. So here the Buddha is speaking about the passing away of dukkha. So we have independence on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact, with contact as condition, feeling arises. With feeling as condition, craving arises. So that would be the normal process in the unenlightened person. But now comes that event where one breaks the connection between craving and what follows. So with the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving comes cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of existence. One is no longer paving the way to a new existence, no longer establishing the conditions for a new existence. And so with the cessation of existence, since one is not, the stream of consciousness is no longer projected into a new existence, there comes the cessation of birth, no further rebirth. With the cessation of birth, there's no more growing old and death, no more sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. So that is the cessation of this whole mass of dukkha, and that is the passing away of dukkha. And then another text also illustrating this. Again, this uses the simile of the great bonfire. So now instead of contemplating enjoyment in the objects that arouse clinging, one contemplates their drawback, their danger, their faults, their defects. And as one contemplates the danger in them, and that means seeing all of these objects of clinging as being impermanent, incapable of yielding the full pleasure one hopes to obtain from them, being subject to change, deterioration, and ultimate destruction, then one loses that attachment to them. And so then craving ceases. With the cessation of craving comes cessation of clinging. One no longer clings to things. With the cessation of clinging, one no longer builds up the causes for new existence. Then comes cessation of birth, cessation of old age and death, and so forth. And then the illustration is like there's a great bonfire burning, which is consuming loads of wood. And then this man doesn't cast dry wood onto it from time to time. In fact, I would say now what the man does is to pour water over the bonfire and throw sand onto it. And so then the bonfire will still burn a little while to exhaust the current load of wood. But since it's not being supplied with any more fuel, lacking sustenance, it's extinguished. Then there's another, maybe still another passage that illustrates the cessation of dukkha in this very life. Okay, so here we have a person who's immersed in ignorance. So this would be the ordinary person who's still given to ignorance. And so this person engages in various activities. Some of the activities are wholesome or meritorious activities, which generate wholesome karma. Some of the activities would be demeritorious. These would be unwholesome, generating unwholesome karma, breaking the moral precepts, of violating the 10 courses of wholesome action. And then the third type of volitional activity is called the unshakable volitional activity. So these are the volitions that are involved in the attainment of the formless meditative absorptions. They are rupa, the formless or non-material meditative absorptions. Okay, so when one engages in wholesome, meritorious activities, those activities generate karma that moves consciousness to what is called the meritorious, onto a desirable or a fortunate plane of rebirth. The fruit of the meritorious karma. When one generates demeritorious volitions, then those volitions, when they take on the karmic role, they move consciousness to the demeritorious, that is, to an unfortunate or miserable state of future existence. And when one generates the unshakable volitional activities by attaining the formless meditative absorptions, then consciousness moves on to the unshakable state. That is, consciousness takes rebirth in the immaterial or formless realms of existence. But in this case, the Buddha is speaking about a monk who abandons ignorance and arouses true knowledge or clear knowledge. And so with the fading away of ignorance and the arising of true knowledge, he does not create or generate any of these volitional activities. And so not generating these volitional activities, he does not cling to anything in the world, not clinging, he personally attains nibbana here and now. So this would be the attaining the ending of dukkha, the extinction of dukkha right in this very life itself. Okay, I think at this point, maybe we can take some questions. Again, if you have questions, you use the hand symbol. Oh, I see. There were some questions. Okay, first is Andrew.
Thank you, Bhante. I am a musician, among other things.
Yeah.
How do I engage in practicing music and performing music
Yeah.
without giving into desire?
Yeah, I think one can use the performance of music in a wholesome way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not sort of it's not, we would say, the direct and rapid way to the attainment of final liberation, but one could use it in a wholesome way by sort of making the aspiration or the wish, may this music be uplifting to others and give a true wholesome enjoyment to others. And so with this, I would say one is forming a meritorious wish to, it's a way of generating a meritorious karma, to wish the music to be uplifting and even enriching the minds of others. Does that work?
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante.
Because even though sometimes, the Buddha's precepts, as far as monastics go, are rather strict about enjoying music and performing music, but I think outside that monastic context, music, in fact, sometimes I've said, this is a bit heretical, that if I were alive during the time of the Buddha, I would have to lodge a little protest against that strict regulation that the Buddha has laid down for monastics. I could see the Buddha coming from his aristocratic background, the life in the palace, where music would be like the female musicians playing this kind of sensually exciting music. And that would have been the kind of music maybe enjoyed by the wealthy elite in the Buddha's time, the kshatriyas and the vaishyas, the princes and the merchants. So when the Buddha established the monastic order, he had to make that kind of music off limits. But to me, it seems that especially the great classical music of Western classical music, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, the Handel, Vivaldi, Telemann. That kind of music can be very spiritually uplifting, I found in my own experience. Yeah, so if one listens to it, it could really sort of lift. In fact, I have to say that when I was the last years of college, it was in a way when I became very much involved with the classical music that it seemed to, in my own experience, bring up certain spiritual dimensions that had been previously lying dormant. And that was part of the bridge over which I walked to come to my interest in Eastern spirituality and then eventually to Buddhism. And also, I have to say, also the classical music of India also could be quite spiritually uplifting. Like music of at least the key performers that I know of, like Ravi Shankar and Ali Akbar Khan. Now there are later generations of Indian classical musicians, but it's very deeply spiritual, the Indian classical music. Okay, Chi.
Bhante, yesterday in the Q&A session, you in answering the question about the Sankhara Dukkha experienced by Arahats and Buddha, you mentioned that there's recognition but not a felt experience. So I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
What I mean is that, say, the Arhat will know that all of the experience occurring through the senses is inherently dukkha in that it's subject to this arising and passing away. And sometimes it can be even quite disturbing experiences, even through the senses, like they can be maybe cutting the foot on sharp stones, or, well, that would be bodily pain, so that would be dukkha. But when they contemplate their own experience with insight, they see that it's arising and passing away. And so there's a sense of the oppressiveness of constant arising and passing away of phenomena through the senses, but they don't feel suffering because of that. They neither, of course, not bodily suffering, bodily pain, and no mental distress because of that. But they have that perspective, that outside perspective of the nibbanic or nirvanic experience from which they can look back at their ordinary sensory experience and see this is dukkha. Whatever is bound up with the senses is rising and passing, and so it's dukkha. I remember a sutta which illustrates this. But I can't think of a location right now. I'd have to give a little thought to it. Okay, does that deal with the question?
Yeah, thank you, Bhante.
Okay. Enoka? Okay,
Morning,
please.
Bhante.
Good morning.
My question is about craving and desire. So I find, as a younger woman, I desired more things than I do now, but I still crave and desire like good food or watching a movie.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, at what stage of the path does one completely cease the desire or craving? Is it at the Arhat stage, or is it Sakradagami, Anagami, or is it just a gradual cessation?
Yeah, first, in terms of ordinary life, I would have to say ordinary practice. I have to say that the removal of craving is a gradual process. And one has to start by sort of controlling and removing what I call the grosser and more harmful forms of craving. And so we do that, like the Buddha teaches, like a gradual sequential path. So we have to like eliminate the craving for excessive wealth. We need a certain amount of prosperity in order to live comfortably and happily. But when we find that there's this obsessive craving to acquire more wealth, or the craving that drives the desire for position, fame, power, intense experiences, maybe unwholesome forms of sexual pleasure, transgressive forms of sexual pleasure, and so forth. Those are the things that we have to work on controlling and eliminating in our everyday life. But the kinds of like normal pleasure that help to make our life fulfilling and meaningful, I don't say get rid of the desire for those kind of things. Like even myself, I'm a monk 48 years, but some of my supporters say, as I mentioned earlier, let's go out for Indian food or for pizza or ice cream. Then I'll say, yes, let's go. I don't say, that's just a craving, I'm going to give it up. So one just has to work, gradually at removing coarser forms of craving, and then at least controlling the ordinary desires that make life fulfilling so that they don't become obsessive and domineering and start to proliferate. But as far as, this along the stages of the path, even the Sotapanna has not yet eliminated craving. But what the Sotapanna eliminates are the forms of craving that could lead to rebirth in the lower realms, the craving that leads to moral transgression. It's only with the stage of anagami or non-returner that one eliminates the craving for the 5 objects of sensual pleasure, and only the arhat who's completely eliminated even the craving for renewed existence. So I say, to be practical, let's work on, the unwholesome and more obsessive types of craving that control our lives here and now. And then we can worry about the lighter, non-immediately harmful forms of craving as we move along with the practice.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, Roland, unmute. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. So at death, what happens to the arahat? I mean, we talk about stream of consciousness projecting back as samsara, or at death it just ends and it's over. But so I'm a little confused here.
Okay, in the case of the arahat, the process of the repeated or relinking of consciousness comes to an end. So there's no more, let's say the stream of consciousness is no longer being driven by craving and ignorance. And so with the passing away of the arhat, the stream of consciousness is unestablished anywhere. The Buddha says it's apatti titang vinyanam. So the consciousness does not settle any place, does not find a foothold any place, and so it is extinguished, and there's no renewing of the 5 aggregates, of the assemblage of the 5 aggregates. But the extinguishing of consciousness is not like an annihilation, but it is the attainment of the, what we call the nibbana element without residue remaining. It's a state that the Buddha calls the unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned. So the stream of consciousness, the functioning of consciousness comes to an end. And there's no more assemblage of the 5 aggregates, but what remains is this unconditioned nibbana element. Okay, Achan Kovila.
Yes, Bhante. I have a question about the 3 types of craving. I've heard one teacher propose that all 3 types can be subsumed under craving for existence, bhava tanha. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure that we would say that all 3 could be subsumed under craving for existence. But what I would say is that the Buddha seems to give the craving for existence the more prominent role when he's explaining the continuity of samsara, that it is the craving for existence, as I said earlier, that drives the repetition of existence within samsara.
I think their case was that you could say the craving for sensuality was that you're basically craving to become the person that enjoys that sensual gratification. Or is that too much of a stretch, you think?
It seems to me a bit of a stretch.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Okay, Richie.
Hi, Biko. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Well, Joy with us. Earlier, we were talking about what was loss, the Dukkha of loss, and we moved on to where you said there was this thing, which I'd want to know the name for, where you said it's holding fast in faithfulness, not disappearing to desire again. And I added that it is leading to immortality with right action and nibbana. I wanted to know about that holding fast in faithfulness, what that is called, what that section is. And I did have one more question about nibbana.
Wait, before you go to that other question, go back and use that phrase. It doesn't sound like something I said. Holding fast in faithfulness?
Maybe not faithfulness. It was the holding fast to. Before you said the parable and the story of the young business guy who had shown up to be very well fired up and maybe even threatening the other folk.
Yeah.
The CEO. And there was an aspect kind of called holding fast. And I look at it kind of like a samadhi where we would have 10% so that we're not disappearing into desire. Again, we're disappearing without desire. We would have like 10%, or every 10 seconds, I would have 1 second to just recall and hold that. I was wondering about the holding fast. What would that be?
If I use that expression, I'm not quite sure in what sense I used it. I'd have to go back and listen to my...
Sure thing. Maybe we can talk another time too. And I did have a question about nibbana, where I see a lot of this teaching on nibbana kind of leading to, yes, the cessation of many of the ills around here, but is it also supposed to be we have reached a point of what's an immortal life and fully capable of passing through all of the ills and not being so much affected by them? Or is that another term? Because I've been calling this nibbana reverse nirvana.
Well, the texts speak about two nibbana elements, which I had in my notes here. One is the nibbana element with residue remaining. So this is the description of the nibbana as attained by the arahant, the liberated one, whose sense faculties are still functioning, and he still experiences pleasure and pain through the senses. But it is the destruction of lust or greed, hatred and delusion for him or her that is called the nibbana element with a residue remaining. The residue is the assemblage of the 5 aggregates which are continuing to function through the remainder of the lifespan. And the arhat he's destroyed lust, hatred, and delusion. And then and while alive, the arhat has access to a special meditative absorption in which they can directly experience, the mind can become absorbed into the unconditioned nibbana, which is the state described as the unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned. So they can experience that, absorb the mind into it in that special meditative absorption. It's called the attainment of the fruit of arhatship. So in their everyday lives, just lust or greed, hatred, and delusion are permanently destroyed. And from time to time, they can sit and enter into this meditative absorption on the unconditioned nibbana. Then comes nibbana element without residue remaining. So the text is rather taciturn about this. So it says, here the monk is an arhat, one completely liberated through final knowledge. And then in this very life, and we should add here, with the breakup of the body, in this very life, all that is felt, all feeling, not being delighted in, will become cool right here. And that is the nibbana element without residue remaining. So what this means in effect is that when the arhat passes away, because there's no more craving, no more clinging, there's no more projection of the stream of consciousness into a new existence. And so the process of repeated becoming comes to an end, which is described as a cooling down of the fire of existence. And that's the nibbana element without residue. And that is sort of the direct access to this unconditioned nibbana, the unborn, unmade, unconditioned. Yeah, I'll have to leave it at that. It's one of the most difficult topics, is the nature of nibbana. Okay, we'll have to move on now to the next question. This is Xiao Ping. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, unmute. Okay.
Thank you, Bundy. Actually, it's me. We share the same line.
Excuse me?
Thank you, Bundy, for teaching. I'm me. We share the same line with Xiaoping. My question is, how craving for non-existence leads to rebirth? I can understand craving leads to rebirth, but non-craving for existence, how that leads to rebirth?
I see. Okay, I see. How the craving for annihilation can lead to rebirth. It seems, this is just, I haven't found this question raised in the text and answered in the text, but it seems to me that even the person who has the craving for non-existence still has the craving for existence.
Okay.
So even though maybe at an intellectual level, they have the craving for non-existence, but deep beneath the surface, at the subconscious level, they have the craving for existence. And that craving for existence is what will generate the rebirth.
Thank you, Wendy. I have another question. And for craving, and you gave an example, like in the Chinese book. It's very interesting. How, if in your case, if it's an arahat, what happened to arahat? If somebody offer Indian food and she feel no difference, and what it is. Another example, like for
wait, you're going too fast. Please slow down.
I just say, like you gave an example, if arahats living in Chongyan Monastery and eat like Chinese food all the time, someone offer Indian food, will he feel delight? And also, like if a run.
Wait. Okay, to take that question first. He'll accept the invitation, I think, out of kindness, out of compassion for the kindness of the person making the offer. Presumably, probably the different arhats will make different decisions. Maybe one will say, I'm satisfied with the daily food, I'm receiving a Chuang Yen, but probably many arhats, out of compassion for the person making the offering, will accept the offer and go out for the Indian food, but not delighting in it. Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, the next one is Susie B, Pennsylvania.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm unmuted. I'm getting all these messages.
No, I'm hearing you.
Thank you. Oh, Bhante, I was so I have heard, I'm so very grateful. I have heard that without a body, there would be no suffering. I have heard that taught. Am I misunderstanding that? That it is having a body that creates the mental, the physical, and the existential suffering, the bodily experience. And that mindfulness of the body is the only way to, that without mindfulness of the body, there is no enlightenment, liberation. The reason I'm bringing this up is because in the beginning you used the word, the three kinds of suffering: mental, physical, mental, and existential.
Yeah.
And in experiencing this in my own life, I watched, this also refers to someone, the craving for annihilation leading to rebirth. My brother, 9 years in a very, very broken body, desperately desiring to die, but very obviously not necessarily enlightened, not on the road to liberation, so that desperate to get out of that broken body because it was causing him so much pain. And being able to observe, we observe internally, externally. I know that's part of the teaching. So I'm learning from observing. I spent time with him and I watched, saw the suffering. I have a sister who's craving in a nursing home, less pain, always craving to eat because it's the only thing that brings her pleasure. And so this existential, which I think I'm taking it not necessarily in the manner in which you mean, but if the Four Noble Truths are the basic, encompass all of the Buddha's teaching, then I am wondering, what is this experience of having a body for? Why is there any way that the Buddha brought some form of understanding to why I have to be here to watch and see so much suffering in others, and then learn also how to rise above or pass through and become awake, so that I will be able to not dislike, not find it too painful, but grow and learn from it in order to be able to even be present now with the level of suffering I see everywhere. I find I'm on this retreat holding my head in my hands because there's elements of my family life I just can't stand, and they keep cropping up. And I know my skillfulness is supposed to be developed through meditation to put my consciousness on wholesome. But what I keep thinking to myself, what is the point of having this body in the first place if I'm supposed to learn something in order to release me from having this body or the desire for continued existence? I don't know if this is answerable, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share it. Anything you say that can help me. Thank you.
Okay. There's no sort of, I say, predetermined, let's say, commandment or no predetermination that we are supposed to learn something from the body. It's just, according to the Buddhist teaching, the nature of sentient existence that we acquire the body. But we can, not by following some predetermined ordinance, but just through our own experience of the body, we can learn and understand the nature of the body and the faults and defects that are bound up with bodily existence. And, you know, that's particularly the function of what you mentioned, the contemplation of the body within the structure of the four foundations of mindfulness. So the Buddha takes the body as the first foundation of mindfulness. First of all, because mindfulness of the body is what builds up initially the power of samadhi, of concentration, but also the exercises and mindfulness of the body enable us to understand the body more clearly and deeply, because we build up a lot of, well, let's say we operate our lives, we live our lives on the supposition that the body is the instrument for finding pleasure and enjoyment. And yet through the practice of contemplation of the body, we start to see into the real nature of the body, the inherently, what I would call from one angle, the unattractive nature of the body, that it's an assemblage of organs and tissues functioning together, which are not particularly beautiful on themselves. And then through contemplation of the four elements, we see the material constitution of the body and its relation to external matter. And then through the what's called the charnel ground contemplations, we come to recognize the inevitability of death and the eventual decay and disintegration of the body. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's my attempt to do so. Okay, maybe I'll just take one more question. If it's simple and short, then we'll have to break for the lunch. This is Laura.
I don't know how simple it is. I guess it's similarly connected to what Susie B was asking in some ways. What would the life of the Arahat be without craving? And upon passing, what will keep that liberated one in non-nothingness? Kind of like, why are we here in this body? Why were we brought here going way back before any life? What is this body? So it's kind of
okay. Maybe these are you've asked several questions and they're rather complex, and we have to go up for the meal now. So why don't you hold this question? I'll give you priority for the next question. You and Wiley, I saw had the hand raised. You'll have priority when we have the next Q&A session. So we'll have to break now, and then we will come back. Yeah, there'll be the walking meditation from 1:30 to 2, the sitting meditation 2 to 2:30. Then the next teaching session will be at 2:40 p.m. So then we'll go into the Noble Eightfold Path. So hold your questions for then. Okay, so thank you all for joining, and please do rejoin us in the afternoon.
Thank you, Bhante.